Hi, everyone. My name is Yusra Iftikhar, and I am your Director of Communications, and my gender pronouns are she, her, and hers. Welcome to APTA Live Student Night. This is a part 2 to our June series, Fostering Allyship in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and I am very excited to be highlighting the student voice again tonight. If you've been here before, you might remember the monthly exchange essay chats. APTA Live Student Nights will follow the same format where we'll host discussions on topics of interest with guests every month and take questions live from viewers. Tonight, we're talking all things allyship to the LGBTQ plus community in PT. Go ahead, shout out your name, your year, and your program down below. If you're a current student or a fresh PT, go ahead and also post your questions in the comments throughout tonight's interview and use hashtag APTA Live if you're engaging on Twitter. I do have a quick disclaimer that's going to sound very similar to the one I gave in part 1 and is on behalf of tonight's panel. We know that these conversations can be difficult and uncomfortable, especially for those of us for whom they're new. We hope you will view tonight's conversation not as calling out any one person or institution, but rather an opportunity to learn and gain valuable insight from 2 current students in 2 different DPT programs. I tweeted earlier this week from my personal page that I promise to maintain your anonymity tonight, so please ask your questions free of the fear of judgment, and I'll ask my board members who are scanning for questions not to send me the person's name alongside their question. I hope you will also watch tonight with the recognition that my guests do not have this option of anonymity, so we hope you'll allow us all grace, an open mind, and your understanding that while Howie and Madison have powerful voices, they still represent only themselves and their experiences. All right, let's jump right into this interview. Madison, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Howie. Please introduce yourselves to our viewers.
Hi, my name is Madison. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm a 3rd-year student at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, Austin, Texas campus.
I'm Howie. Pronouns are he, him, his. I am also a 3rd-year student at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia.
All right, so congratulations on your 3rd-year status. And Madison, you are in clinical rotations right now, correct? And Howie, you are not?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So we'll keep that in mind going forward. Madison, when I originally proposed this APTA Live, I actually initially suggested a different weekend, and you asked if we could do it tonight instead. What's the significance of tonight's date?
Today is the 51st anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And for those people that don't know, Stonewall was a gay bar in Greenwich Village in New York City. It was owned by a mafia family that had a lot of really shady business practices. But what they did provide was a safe place for the LGBTQ plus community to congregate, and that was illegal at the time. So those gay bars at that time were really subject to a lot of police raids, but the mafia family that owned it paid off the police. So they were supposed to tip them ahead of time, hey, we're gonna come in, and that way it protected their patrons and it protected the bar as well. But on the night of June 26, 1969, or excuse me, June 28th, 1969, the police that were paid off did not tip off the bar owners, and a search warrant was served on that bar with the sole purpose of arresting the gay community at that time. And certain patrons were allowed to leave, and the ones that were left inside were mostly people of color. And the word trans was not at use at that time. It hadn't really been created. So they were drag queens and what they called at that time cross-dressers, which is not an okay term to use now. But they were held inside, and the people that had been let go were supposed to leave, but instead formed a group outside where they were protesting police brutality and this homophobia. Things escalated. A butch lesbian Black woman by the name of Stormy Delarvie was arrested and was resisting police brutality when they hit her on the head with a baton. And she famously turned back to the crowd and said, basically, aren't you guys going to do anything about this? And the crowd really responded from there. And so there's a lot of mystery about who really threw the first brick, so to speak, but a riot broke out and there was over 500 people that were either from the bar or they were from the neighborhood. And that's really the reason that we have Pride parades now and Pride Month. So without those trans women of color, mostly Black trans women, we would not have Pride as we know it today.
Yeah, and so that takes me to my next question about that intersectionality. In part one of the series, I asked my guests, Michael, Mark, and Brianna, about navigating Black Lives Matter during Pride Month. So I want to ask what it's been like for both of you to navigate celebrating Pride Month while also being an ally to the Black community and recognizing that intersectionality there, especially for Black trans women, like you brought up, who are historically and currently part of a particularly targeted group for hate and violence.
Do you want to go first, Howie?
Sure. I mean, I think for me personally, it's very easy to support both. I've never felt like I've needed to pick one or the other. Both are extremely important and very needed, and obviously both do matter. And I have seen some posts on social media and around, that is unfortunate, where they think that Black Lives Matter is taking away from Pride Month, or Pride Month is taking away from Black Lives Matter, or whatever. And it's, to me, a bit upsetting to see that people, for some reason, have the desire or the want to pick one and not accept the other, when communities like these are very connected, especially looking at the history of Pride Month and the queer and trans community, and how, trans women of color, specifically Black trans women, are pioneers for this community and very, very important, and we need to recognize that.
Yeah, absolutely. Madison, anything to add?
I agree with Howie. It should be really easy to support all of these movements, especially, again, like we've both said, because we would not be where we are now without those Black trans women and those other people of color that really started this movement and then just kept their feet on the gas pedal. Mm-hmm. And we should be sure that intersectionality is a part of all of our social movements, because there are always members of communities that are not recognized as they should be, even in their own communities. So in the LGBTQ plus community, Black trans women are most targeted. And in the Black community, they're still part of that community. So they're still the most targeted, and we need to have space and visibility for those most targeted members.
Sure, absolutely. So I feel like I know y'all pretty well at this point, having followed you both on social media, having had multiple conversations about this, but could you tell the audience a little bit more just about why you feel like you've either wanted to or had to speak up on LGBTQ issues, and how you've been doing that in your own communities and on your own social pages? Howie, we can start with you and then go to Madison.
Sure. I wasn't, like, growing up, I never really had the desire to kind of use my voice and kind of speak out about my experiences and things like that. But very recently, I had the amazing opportunity to write a piece for APTA, which has been phenomenal. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from, but I think I've been a lot more inclined to speak up and use my voice since coming into PT school. Mm-hmm. I had some negative experiences, as many students do, that come from minority backgrounds in any sort of institution that's a predominantly white institution. Mm-hmm. And I was very fortunate to find some folks who were very supportive and very accepting, and really, really understanding that there is a lack of spaces for specifically LGBTQ plus folks. Mm-hmm. So I was really fortunate to find people to be those allies and to support me through my endeavors to kind of help create a space, in which I did at VCU. We were able to create a space called Practice with Pride. Mm-hmm. And it's basically just a open, like, lunchtime hour session where any student who identifies as part of the LGBTQ plus community can come and meet other people who identify as part of that community as well. Anyone on our health science campus, so then it's a bit of intersectionality in terms of not just identity, but also profession. And then we get to meet faculty members and staff who have navigated their life as being part of that community, but also being part of the health profession. And it's been really, really great to kind of expand your network when normally it's not the easiest to do, especially when so many programs are already siloed in their own little, buildings and rooms and classes and all of that.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like a really great interprofessional opportunity too. And then from the sounds of it, it's not just students, that it's faculty members as well coming in and sharing their experiences. And I can imagine that only helps to kind of break down some of the fear associated with that power dynamic too, I think. So yeah, that's great. And I think it's fantastic that you've been a part of starting that and keeping that going at BCU. So they're very lucky to have you there. Madison, tell us about, well, whatever you want us to tell us about, but definitely tell us about Instagram.
Yeah. I've always felt, well, I was always told by my mom specifically to stand up for what you believe in. And that's an interesting, I don't know. My parents are very unaccepting of many things. They're racist, they're sexist. Well, not sexist really per se, but they're homophobic. They have a lot of not great beliefs, but they always taught me to stand up for myself. And so after I came out, I really started doing that for the LGBTQ plus community, because there was just so many instances that I was not being supported or I was having really negative experiences. And because I was raised to speak up for myself, I felt like I was able to do that, thankfully, and have my voice be heard. And so I started my Instagram because I didn't have any role models to look for in the PT community that are in my community, the LGBTQ plus community. And so I started that really just to see if anybody else was actually interested in trying to increase inclusive healthcare and make that a thing, and let other people know that I am here and there is at least one person that you can see in the profession, because that can be really powerful.
Mhm.
So, and that's been an amazing tool. Like, I'm connected to PTs all over the nation, students and professionals, OTs. I've got some speech language. I've got some just other healthcare professionals, and even some people across the world. And they're asking me for resources, and I'm able to learn from them and help them out. And so it's been a really amazing platform. And I never really thought that it would become what it's becoming. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't remember if you said this, I apologize, but your Instagram account is at LGBTQ Physical Therapist. I
yes.
would highly recommend everyone go follow that account. I know that's not your personal account, but like you said, you've been able to provide so many resources. Tell me more about Terminology Tuesday.
Yeah, the feedback that I get from a lot of people is a lot of older people that are like, I don't know what those letters stand for. And even a lot of younger people don't. And there's always new terms coming out. So it's always something that I need to brush up on and make sure that I'm up to date on. You don't just inherently know this stuff when you're part of the community. So Terminology Tuesday is a way for me to break those terms down of the most common terms that are in the community, that healthcare professionals would need to know. So most people know the LGB, but I definitely highlighted the T because that again is a marginalized community. I highlighted non-binary. There are some other things that I highlighted, and I really just want it to be like, you can read the post and you can say, okay, now I know that term and I feel comfortable with that term, and I know what to associate that term with and what to not say, because there's a lot of things that you're not supposed to say, that can be very hurtful for people. And so I want to highlight, this is why it's important, this is what the term means, and these are things that you should absolutely not do, in the hopes of saving some people some hurt, and also saving some people the embarrassment for people that really want to do the best that they can and have the right intentions, but just don't have the appropriate language for that yet.
Sure. And then just to make sure that we're not making any sort of assumptions, would y'all mind real quick saying what LGBTQ stands for?
Yeah. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. And then the plus is a bunch of everything else, basically, because if you put all of those letters, it looks kind of like, people say alphabet soup. There's a lot of terms, a lot of people in the community.
Yeah. And like you said too, I think you make a really great point that we're not all born knowing exactly what those terms are, what they mean. And people are doing the work to, like you're doing the work, for example, to help other people to better understand those terms. So say I don't have an Instagram, say I happen to not follow you for some reason, and I don't know what's okay to say, what's not okay to say. How do I still become an ally who's, fearlessly speaking up for people, who can be an active ally without being really afraid of saying the wrong thing? And either of you or both of you can take that question.
I can go. One of the things that I like to tell people is that if you have a friend that's in the community and you know them well, and you can confidently say that you are close friends, for me personally, I'm always very open to answering any sort of questions that you may have. I might not have all the answers. I probably don't have all the answers, but I am more than happy to help you along with that journey, especially if you're asking in a way that is to help your future understanding of the community and help with your profession and how you want to be more, inclusive and, just more respectful to your patients or your colleagues or your peers. Also, Google is a great resource. I mean, a lot of us that are in PT school and also, or who are PTs or PTAs, we're taught how to do research and evidence-based practice. So you can use those same skills that you're taught to use the internet to your advantage to really kind of see what is the new lingo, what is okay to say, what is not okay to say, and what are some outdated terminologies, what aren't.
Yeah. Did y'all think you'd be talking this much about this part of your identity coming into PT school? That's a question I asked last time's guest as well, and theirs was a resounding no, that they did not think they'd be talking about their race that much. So did you think you'd be talking about being part of the LGBTQ community this much while in a PT program?
No.
They did the same.
Mostly, and I don't want to stereotype people because I hate when I'm stereotyped, but Texas is part of the Bible Belt, and very religious people tend to not like me and my community. And so I just figured people would be really turned off to that. And I wasn't planning on starting my Instagram either. So I was like, yeah, I'll kind of share that with a group of friends, and that's probably as far as it'll go. And then now I'm like the little rainbow sheep on campus. And I've got the Instagram. So it's definitely way more than I thought that I would be talking about it.
Do people in your program know about your Instagram?
Some of them do. I don't do like a lot of self-promotion. It's really weird for me. So I have friends that follow me, and some other people that I know are in my program, and some people that are on other campuses, because my school actually has 5 campuses now. So yeah.
Got it. Okay, got it. And then Howie, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I was not expecting to, be as, like I said, when I was growing up, I never really thought I would be in this kind of space and be using my voice. I mean, I'm not out to my parents, so that's a whole nother navigation in terms of social media and just like making sure that those are mostly private and keeping things to myself. But I mean, since I have been reaching out to many people within the community, but also within the PT community, it's been phenomenal. I've been really, really enjoying the connections that I've been making, and I definitely wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Howie, I want to ask you too. You have the luxury of being a double minority. So you're part of the LGBTQ community, you're also Asian American, and you wrote about that dual identity in your blog post for APTA. It's called Being Myself. I would highly, highly recommend everyone read it. I just read it for like the 5th time right before this, and it hits me really hard. What has that been like for you, navigating both of those identities on top of everything else that you are too? Do you feel comfortable being entirely yourself at school? You said you're not out to your parents. Do you feel good being entirely yourself at home too? Tell us a little bit more about that part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, the article says it all for the most part. I mean, I think there was a point in time where I felt, when I came to PT school, I had felt like, moving out of my parents' place and, being in a completely new city with completely new people, I felt like I could truly be who I wanted to be in terms of like really flourishing with my Asian American identity, with my queer identity as well. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I I was thrown back into a PWI, and I felt like the Asian identity had to kind of be suppressed a little bit, which is hard to do when you look
Right.
Asian. But I mean, I think I've been able to kind of navigate and learn that I am allowed to be who I want to be, and I'm allowed to be myself, and that's perfectly fine. And I really enjoy doing it. I mean, I have had the luxury to make amazing friends in my program and at my campus and back home as well, who know all of me, and they know, things I love, things I don't love, and all everything about me.
Yeah.
But it is, at the same time, it is difficult, and it is stress inducing every time I do go back to my parents' place. Just because I have to be a lot more cognizant about how I say things, what I say. I have a partner who I don't talk about at home, and I can't talk about. So it is stressful, but I mean, for the most part, I'm very happy with where I am now in terms of my identity and everything like that.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Madison, you've talked in the past about being white and feeling like you can hide parts of your identity to some extent if you need to. Can you talk a little bit more about why you felt that need? Because a question I asked my guest last time was, sometimes the question comes up, and it's very well intentioned, that, well, why can't you just be yourself? You should just be yourself. You should just be happy being yourself. So have you ever felt like you couldn't be entirely yourself, and why is that?
Yes, I have. I felt like I couldn't be entirely myself for the first 23 years of my life. Like I said, my parents are not accepting. They're very conservative with their views, to the point of it being like really, really conservative, kind of probably as conservative as you would imagine the worst case scenario. So I wasn't out for 23 years because I didn't feel safe. And when I was talking about that I can hide if I want to, one, I don't want to, and two, there's a certain level of guilt that I have that I can hide because not everybody can. But it's not easy. Like, once you embrace who you really are and you start living your truth, asking somebody to go back into the closet even for like 5 minutes is like actual hell, the closest that I could imagine. Because there's a lot of emotions tied to that, and there's a lot of repression tied to that. So asking somebody to do that is like asking, people of color to suddenly become white. Like, you can't do it. And you don't want to, right? You want to be proud of who you are. You want to live authentically. But I could if I wanted to, because I look, stereotypically like a sexual person, right? And the reason that people think that is because there's a lot of stereotypes about what a woman in the LGBTQ plus community looks like, and a lot of labels that are assigned to me when I say that I'm married to a woman. Doesn't matter how I identify, they always put usually lesbian, and that's not how I identify. And there's a certain stereotype that goes with that. But to me, every time that I am out and about, and literally when I have opportunities where I have to come out, because it's constant, I always have to weigh, am I safe in this situation being who I am, or would it be better just to not say anything, or to intentionally not correct people? So a lot of my patients, they'll see the ring on my finger and they'll say, "Oh, are you married?" And I say, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, your husband must be so nice." And instead of starting a conflict, which is usually what happens, especially given the crowd that I'm around right now, it's easier for me to just be like, "Yeah," because my wife is really sweet, and she is what the people say,
Yeah.
but the assumption that she is a man makes me feel unsafe, because for me to correct then puts me in an unsafe situation. And I'm also out here alone. So if somebody was to find that out and then find out where I am, it's not so far-fetched to think that my safety would be in danger, or my educational safety, because if my clinical instructors don't agree with who I am, then having bad reports and evaluations could cause me to lose my internship, and then I would not pass and have to retake. And so there's a lot of considerations.
Right, absolutely. Howie, did you have any thoughts on that you wanted to add anything to, or?
I mean, it's the same. I think a lot of people who are part of the, queer and trans community, they have to weigh the good and the bad a lot in terms of how they want to tell people who they are. I mean, there are times where I'm in Philly right now, but I mean, back in Richmond for school when my partner was visiting, or I'm here too, like if we were holding hands on the street, like we've been yelled at slurs, and like, it's not fun for that to happen. So there are times, but at the same time, there are also people who like see that and they're like, super happy about it, and they're like, they love love. I'm like, yeah, sweet. But so like we have to, it's a constant, especially with strangers that you don't know, and especially within a profession like ours where we are hands-on. People can take it the wrong way or whatever that means to them, and so a lot of the times we do have to just kind of balance if it's worth it, because a lot of times, sometimes it just isn't.
Yeah. So both of you brought up, or Madison, you brought up your clinical internships, and both of you being third years, you may have now a better sense of what it's like in your programs, what it's like for you specifically. So if you were to talk right now, say to program faculty, what are some things that you would want the people who are watching right now to know about being an inclusive faculty member, and should they open that conversation with you if you do come out to them specifically? Like, should they be seeking that conversation out? Should they wait for you to come to them? Is there other stuff they can do in the classroom or in their syllabi to make you feel safer?
Madison, you can go first.
Oh, okay. I hate doing that because I don't want to like start talking and then you want to talk. I think in our curriculum specifically, cultural competence isn't really addressed at all. So that's a larger conversation that obviously, needs to change in our program. But I know Howie and I have both talked to you about having case studies where the patients are very explicitly part of the community. And that's just one way that we can start breaking down some stereotypes and really have some representation. And having a cultural competency class as part of curriculum, I think should be mandatory in all programs, because our patients are diverse, but our classrooms are not. And a lot of people aren't comfortable trying to make connections to increase their own cultural competence. So if you make it mandatory and do it well, then at least that provides some sort of baseline foundational knowledge. But it's really simple things, like faculty should be there in any form to support students, and wearing, a little pin like this, or another, like a Black Power fist, or something that visibly tells me that you are a safe person for me, because I can't assume, of the three of us, none of us look stereotypically part of the community, and yet two of us are, right? And so we're not going to know as students if it's a safe space unless it's explicitly stated. And that can be in the form of pronouns at the end of email signatures. It can be, when the curriculum is made to be more inclusive. It can be the pins. It can take a lot of different forms, and it should take many forms. So it's almost overly stated that it's a safe space for students.
Cool.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate to have two faculty members who identify as part of the community, and they have always been very, very upfront about it. I mean, for one of my faculty members, when she gave us our first lecture, or first couple lectures, she just mentioned offhand that she has a wife. And to someone like me, that means a lot. Like, many people might not just like pick that up, or they might just brush it off. But like, that shows me that this person could be someone that I could talk to about any sort of issues that I might have with my sexuality.
Right.
And I had a very short clinical with someone who also identifies as part of the community, and she's now a faculty member at VCU as well. And I had a blast. Like, I could feel like I could be who I was and who I am, and I didn't feel like I had to weigh the cost benefit and all of this different things. So I think it's being vocal about being supportive is, I think, one of the most important and frankly very easy thing to do. I wouldn't recommend necessarily saying that like, hey, if you are gay and you want to come talk to me, come talk. Just just make it subtle, make it easy. It's
Yeah. And everything you said too just kind of points back to how important representation is in any profession, in our profession in particular. I think that the fact that you had somebody who was going to be your mentor anyway, and the fact that you could identify with them in more than just wanting to help your patients through physical therapy, I think is huge. So that's great. I'm glad you had that experience. We have a question here from Facebook, actually kind of about representation. Somebody asked, people in the LGBTQ community face a lot of discrimination from their healthcare providers. Do you think that's at all part of the reason why PT has a poor LGBTQ representation due to fear of biases or not being treated equally? It's okay if you don't have an answer too.
No, I think that could play into it. I think it more gets back to just the lack of representation. Like, one, I feel like most of us don't really know anything about APTA board members. Like, we know Sharon Dunn's the president, but there's no obvious representation, until recently when she made a statement about Black Lives Matter, and when I can't remember which one, but when Trump introduced something that a law that was basically allowed healthcare providers to discriminate, she made a statement that that's not best practice and that's not what our organization's about. But other than that, like, we don't have very much representation. I didn't even know about PT Proud, which is a section under the Health and Policy Administration chapter, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't even know that was a thing until this year. And I'm a third-year PT student. I've been active in pre-PT clubs, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So there's just a lack of representation. And if you're not shown that you can do something, that can really deter you from things. And we see that in STEM all the time with women and people of color being turned away because they're not represented well. And healthcare is just like that.
That makes sense. Someone here has a question for y'all. Madison, when you were talking about potentially being at risk within your clinical rotation, someone asked, do you know if there are any protections in place within your school if your clinical instructors or clinical rotations were to have a problem with your identity?
There are, before I accepted my acceptance to my program, I specifically looked at their policy. And there is nothing in the school policy currently or at that time that would protect me based on my sexual orientation.
Okay.
And then to elaborate on that, my school always takes the site's word over the student, no matter what. And that really does mean that. I had a classmate that had a really bad experience with his clinical instructor over something totally different, had 3 letters of recommendation from other employees at that site saying he did not do what that lady said that he did. She's had all of these problems and the school wouldn't even look at it. They took her word over his, and he failed that internship. And now he is a class below me. And so that, I think, needs to change. I mean, they tell us that if you bring these things up, these issues up early, that they can try to intervene and place students in different areas. But I have not seen that to be the case based on that student's experience and other student experiences that I've heard of.
That is really tough. I do want to ask you about a positive experience that you had with a clinical instructor recently. I believe it's not gonna be the right term, but like your secondary CI sort of. You recently posted about celebrating your 10-month wedding anniversary, which congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
But can you tell me a little bit more about what that CI did for you, how that person was almost like a safe space on their own?
Yeah, I only work with her directly Fridays because my other clinical instructor is Monday through Thursday.
Okay.
Excuse me. And I had brought up something that my main clinical instructor had said that kind of bothered me, and I was trying to test the waters to see if I could find a safe space there, because at that time I wasn't out at my clinical site.
Mhm.
And she did create a safe space, and she, you know, specifically made it a point to say that I was okay and she would support me, and that my main CI just needs to be educated more about, you know, social issues, but she is also supportive. Um, and actually, on Friday, we had an hour and a half long chat about just a lot of different things. And she thanked me for giving her a space, because she doesn't get to talk to people like that, because
Yeah.
her views aren't supported where we're at either. And she asked me about my experience being out and growing up the way that I grew up, and about my wife. And so she really made me feel like I'm welcome and that she'll have my back no matter what. And that was already established in a previous conversation, but to really just revisit that and ask about my experiences, and listen, really truly listen and ask more questions, was really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Howie, you are not in long-term rotations right now, but can you tell us about some positive things or positive experiences that you've had either with faculty members or classmates, and give us specific examples of some things that they've done to make you feel like they were not only oh, what's the phrase? I've never lost a word like that, but like actively an ally. It'll come to me. Madison has said it in the past. It'll come to me, but actively an ally to you.
Yeah, I mean, I luckily within my own class, we have 56 students, and out of those 56, we have 5 people who identify as part of the LGBTQ community,
Mhm.
which is like a decent amount of people. Like it's a really good number of people, and like because of that, like I've never felt like I've had to, you know, hide my gayness or whatever in my class. Like I have, and then the people who are part of the community and the friends that I have who aren't, they're extremely supportive. And like
Good.
sometimes I feel like I do speak up a lot, and I want to like use my voice when I feel like it matters, and they almost always have my back. And I send them emails like, hey, can you send this to this person? You know, they're very supportive. So I definitely think within my own class, it's been a positive experience, and having those people who, you know, like you said, representation really does matter. And if we have 5 great students who are going to be physical therapists down the road, then that's 5 PTs who could be mentors or representation for younger kids who will see that, oh, the PT community does accept people who are like me.
Right. Intentional allyship was the phrase I was trying to think of so hard. I want to ask too about this is going back a little ways, but Madison, you brought up pronouns. So would one of y'all mind telling us a little bit about what are gender pronouns? And we clearly have ours next to our names here. We also recognize what our gender pronouns were when we introduced ourselves. So what's the significance of that? Is that something we should be doing all the time? Should we just be reserving it for things like this? What are y'all's thoughts?
Do you want to go, Holly?
You got it.
Okay. There's a couple questions in there, so I'm going to try to answer the easy ones first. Should we be doing this all the time? Absolutely. What are they? They are the terms that you use and that you want to be used for you when you're described. So if you were to say, you know, be describing me to one of your friends, and you would use the words, she likes to do this, she has a wife, that's hers, you know, her thing is this. Because that's how I see myself. I see myself with those pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm cisgender, so I identify with the sex assigned at birth.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm throwing out a lot of terms here, people, but just bear with me. And so what the pronouns do, because people don't assume that I have male pronouns or that I have non-binary pronouns. So for me, it's really easy, right? But for people that don't identify as a specific gender, or identify as something that people don't necessarily think they look like,
Mm-hmm.
pronouns can literally save lives. The trans and non-binary community have the highest rates of depression, PTSD, and suicide. And those rates are very high in the LGBTQ plus community in general, but those are our most at-risk groups. So a small thing like putting pronouns in your email, you know, having a badge that has it on there, or an enamel pin, or on your social media accounts, introducing yourself, saying, hi, my name's Madison, I'm a student physical therapist, my pronouns are she, her, hers. how are you? It's nice to meet you. That opens the door. And that makes me feel safe as somebody that doesn't necessarily have to worry about pronouns. It lets me know that the person's at least making an effort, so they seem more safe to me automatically. But for people that really rely on pronouns being used that reflect who they really are, that can change lives and that can open doors, especially for the community that always has healthcare disparities and has been denied care based on who they are.
Right.
And it is one of the least things that we could do, is to just make it common practice, because while I have the privilege of not having to worry about that, by helping to normalize saying pronouns and putting them on email signatures, it makes it easy for the people that have different pronouns from the way that other people think they look, or specific pronouns that they want to use that make them feel good because that's who they are. And a side note about that, we shouldn't call them preferred pronouns. They're just pronouns. Like, don't say their preferred name. My name's Madison. If I wanted to go by Maddie or something, don't call that my preferred name. It's just, that's my name. If I've told you my name is Maddie, then that's what it is. If I tell you that my pronouns are she, her, hers, those are my pronouns. They're not my preferred, because that's a qualification and that makes it seem like it's an option. Right. So that's just a side note to make sure that we're normalizing this and that we are being inclusive, because words matter and words can hurt too.
Yeah, absolutely. Howie, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think to that point, I mean, just a story that I've encountered in a sense. I work at a hospital, and there's a patient there that was admitted. She's trans, and one of the techs were getting the pronouns wrong, basically, and the tech kept using he, him pronouns for this woman. And when I went to go see her, you saw the tech make that slip up. You could see the pain that it was causing her, and like, it's trauma enough already for her being in the hospital for whatever reason she was in the hospital for. But to have like someone who's supposed to be taking care of you not recognizing who you are and not, like, you know, giving you the pronouns that you clearly identify as, then that can make you feel very unsafe within healthcare. And when healthcare should be that place where we are taking care of you, making you feel better, getting someone's pronouns wrong can be very damaging, and, you know, it can hinder health. But also, I do recognize that it isn't the easiest thing, because especially within, like, looking at medical records and electronic medical records, they don't always have those options. But I think with us as PTs or anyone who's interacting with our patients, kind of using the conversation that we're able to have to really open the gate, and then putting a sticky note in our EMRs, or making a note in there, or making sure that we're telling the next person that's going to come in, hey, these are their pronouns, use them please, because, you know, it really does make a difference. And we have the responsibility to make sure that we're taking care of our patients, not just for ourselves, but for all the other healthcare professionals that we might be working with.
What's your preference on if an ally does misgender somebody, or I guess, what are your thoughts? Do you feel like someone should speak up right then and apologize? Do they not make a big deal out of it? What do you think, either with misgendering or just any other, honestly, microaggressions?
For me, I think it's always been best practice to acknowledge that you made a mistake, apologize for it, and then try to change it. I think overly apologizing and bringing it up continuously within the conversation just kind of belittles it and makes it seem like and then it makes the patient or the person that you're talking to feel like they have to coddle you,
right? Because
it's now their fault for making you feel bad, which is not the point that we're trying to do. So if you do make a mistake and you recognize that it is a mistake, like with most other mistakes, apologize for it, and then move forward by trying your best to correct yourself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when we're in these clinical settings, when we're treating our patients, when and how and should providers be bringing up gender identity and sexual orientation with their patients? Howie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think in any case, if if you're a provider and you want to bring up sexual orientation or gender identity or whatever you're looking for, it needs to be with a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone should be asking who this person sleeps with or what they identify as if it doesn't apply to their care.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you are having a conversation and they decide to bring it up, then you can talk about it a little bit more. But I don't think you as a provider should be the first person to kind of be like, hey, so this is our first time meeting. What is your sexual orientation? Like that's just too much.
Right.
And of course, if it applies to the care that is being given in terms of pelvic health, that might be applicable in terms of what you're looking for. If the patient is talking about their sex life and they want to figure out how to, make sure it's healthy with their pelvic health,
Mm-hmm.
then that opens up the conversation. But I think if it's just out of curiosity, it isn't needed.
All right. Madison, do you agree?
I agree with that. The only thing that I would add is, I would definitely emphasize there needs to be a purpose for it. And if it's just your curiosity, that's super inappropriate and very intrusive. And we don't want that. I don't ask heterosexual people how they have sex or what, parts that they have. So you shouldn't ask that of anybody, really. It's none of your business, unless it is for a medical purpose. But that's really in our field reserved for pelvic health. I would say that trying to make gender neutral language part of your everyday. So if you're trying to ask if somebody, just say, do you live alone or with somebody?
Mm-hmm.
And then, the person will say, I live with somebody. You don't need to know if it's their sister or their wife or their husband or whatever, because all you need to know for social history is there's somebody at home that can help them out, right? Ask if you want to use, languages, and you're trying to have a conversation, just kind of shooting the breeze, you're doing a treatment with somebody, you can say, oh, do you have a partner? Or are you single? Or, if you've established that kind of an environment with your patient, don't just randomly ask that. But keeping things gender neutral allows people to feel safe. So if I don't feel safe enough to say my wife, I would say, yeah, my partner and I like to do this or whatever. And it keeps it neutral, it keeps it safe, and it keeps it comfortable. So if you are presented in a situation where you're trying to just get to know somebody, but you don't want to be intrusive, gender neutral language like that is really helpful.
Yeah. And that too applies across every aspect of our profession too, not just in the clinic. So in terms of creating more inclusive spaces, whether in the clinic or in the classroom, y'all brought up gender neutral language, you brought up in some way showing that you're an ally. You don't have to come out and say it to every single person, but like you said, Madison, having a pin. One of my professors at Duke had a rainbow flag in his office, and he's not the type of person to go around and be like, look, everybody, I'm an ally. Like, he's a lot more humble than that. And so but you can clearly see it when you walk by his office. So I always really appreciated that about him. And then we talked too about finding out a person's pronouns, and I think that gets into too like inclusive paperwork, and if you are in a situation, especially as like a rehab manager or someone who's in a position of power and can have paperwork changed if need be, I think that's important too to think about, because I think that too, correct me if I'm wrong, but it probably takes the work off the patient and it takes the work off the provider to even figure that out. You just write it on the piece of paper along with everything else. Speaking now to your fellow students. So as students, we're subject to that power dynamic when it comes to working with professors and mentors in the clinic. And that can be escalated even more so as a minority. So what advice do you have for students who are not straight, who are not cisgendered, and feel isolated or afraid to talk about their experience with either their faculty or their clinical instructors? Madison, we'll start with you, then go to Howie.
Okay. I would try to find resources, and you can Google them, the Trevor Project, Human Rights Campaign, GLSN, GLAAD, even online, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find a community that you can be supported by, and there's no requirement to come out. That's something that you do when and if you feel safe enough to do so, and there's no there's no negative feelings about if you're out, that's great. If you're not out, that's fine too. As long as you're safe and you're comfortable, just do what you need to do. But if you're feeling like you're in an unsafe environment, and you can't go necessarily to your faculty, see about if you can go higher than them, or if you can find some other students to back you up, because there is strength in numbers, and just going as high as you need to go. If you need to go to your state's board member for their organization, you're going to find somebody somewhere that's going to help you out. It just might take a little bit of time.
Got it.
I think one of the biggest things is find your allies, because it's exhausting to do the work yourself. And having people who will support you and will help you do the work makes everything so much better. And if you are having those, if you're having struggles within your program, look outside your program. If you're on a medical campus like I was, look outside of it. If there's a Center for Student Diversity, if there's an Office of Student Experience, whatever you might be looking for, find something where you have people who will support you. And whether or not it's talking to them, just having a safe space to air your grievances, or having a space where you can build something to where students like you aren't feeling safe, then that's what you need to do. But I think for me, the biggest thing is just finding those people who will support you unconditionally.
Yeah, absolutely. In speaking about resources, I have a question for y'all from Facebook about resources. I actually, real quick, before I forget, wanted to mention, so PT Proud, which is part of APTA, has a 27-page PDF online for free for download called Introduction to LGBTQ plus Competency, and it's a handbook for physical therapy. And so I think that's perfect. Like, I was skimming through it and I was like, what a great place to start if you're overwhelmed, if you're like, I don't know the terms, like just any sort of newness to this conversation. I think that's a fantastic place to start, in addition to following Madison on Instagram, obviously. But I love that that resource has already been created, and also on PT Proud's website, they have several other resources listed as well. So that's a great place to start if you are looking for something like that. But from Facebook, we have a question that asks, do any of you have any LGBTQA+ book or author recommendations for those seeking to learn more?
Yeah, I don't remember what it's called. Let me look real quick. It's
That's
like
fine.
Bodies and Barriers, or I got it from my friend. Follow them on Instagram at the Rainbow OT. They like to put things on there, some good recommendations. But let me look it up really quick. Bodies and Barriers.
Howie, are there any that come to your mind?
Not necessarily any sort of books or resources for PT specifically, but I think there are a lot of books out there that highlight the history of queer and trans folks, and I think it's great to educate yourself on them. I mean, it's super interesting, but also just and throughout your daily life, supporting any sort of queer and trans authors, owners, whatever you're looking for, and just giving them the space that they deserve, because they've been working really hard to get to where they're at. So
yeah, definitely. And especially queer and trans people of color, because people that look like me have gotten a lot of attention for a long time. And there's been a lot of whitewashing of our history. Like, don't watch Stonewall to get some history, because it makes it look like a bunch of white cisgender men started that movement, and that's not accurate. But the book I was talking about is called Bodies and Barriers, Queer Activists on Health, and it's by Kate Kendall. And it's just talking about health disparities, that how that affects the LGBTQ plus community, like their bodies, but also just their lives in general. And I haven't gotten to quite dive into it too deep yet, but it's really good so far.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that one out. And if they haven't already, my board members should be dropping the link to that in the comments as well, if anybody.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. I think we have time for maybe like one or two more questions. So here's another question from Facebook. It asks, what are some ways we can hold our faculty or our programs accountable for staying up to date on LGBTQ+ issues?
If there's a student organization, like we have a student physical therapy association on our campus, and there's talks about trying to get a multicultural club started too, but utilize your student reps and your student organizations on campus, and come up with, hey, this is what we want to tackle, whatever the issue is, you know, if it's Black Lives Matter or if it's the LGBTQ+ community. Figure out what it is that you're wanting and then present it to the faculty, like, hey, we think we need more training on this because we are going to go out into the world and have patients like this, and we need to feel competent in being able to treat them, and trying to link some resources for them, or you know, don't do all the work for them, right? You don't have all the mental capacity in the world, and that's shouldn't be your job either. But just trying to bring it up and try to get some faculty members on board, because that usually helps, you know, with the higher up, the hierarchy of the school as well.
All
right. Yeah, I think I would reiterate it, just using the resources that you have on your campus. I'm extremely privileged and fortunate to have a medical campus. So we have all sorts of, you know, different health professions on it. But I mean, we've had guest lecturers who've come in who aren't necessarily PTs, but they are educated, very educated within health and queer and trans lives and queer and trans health. So I think it's very, very useful to have people like them come in and not just educate the students, but also have faculty and encourage them to attend these sorts of lectures, because they might not have all the answers, and that's okay. You know, we're not expecting everyone to have all the answers all the time. Right. But we do hope that they have an open mind and they are, you know, committed to learning more about a population that has historically and still is being extremely, has been managed poorly in health.
Right. So just like as students, like we're encouraged to seek out help and ask for help and not be afraid. That really goes for really anybody in our field too. Like you said, Howie, no one's expected to have all the answers, but you know, we are expected to try. And I think that's the most important part. Okay, we're getting pretty close to time. So I do want to give you all the chance though, to give just like a last closing statement. If there's anything else that you'd like people to know, anything you feel like we didn't hit on. Madison, we can start with you and then go to Howie. This is your time. Anything at all?
I'll be quick. I am a person that is comfortable answering any questions that you have. Don't expect everybody to do that, but I do have that space and I do welcome questions. So if anybody does want to connect with me after and ask questions, you can ask me anything. You won't offend me. I do ask that you think about the question you're going to ask and try to make it as non-offensive as possible. And I will answer your question, but don't be surprised if I don't say, hey, I know that you probably didn't mean that, but this is why you asking it this way is not the best. And that's really just to educate whoever's asking me more. It's not for me to be a jerk or anything. But don't expect everybody to do that, and do please reach out for resources. You're not going to know everything. Howie and I don't know everything. There are huge gaps in our knowledge. There are huge gaps in our experiences that we will likely never have, just because of the lives that we lead and the people that we are. So seek out multiple perspectives. We are not monoliths. We are not the owners of all the knowledge, and we don't expect you to be perfect at this at all. Growth is about always fighting to be better. And so you should never feel like you've gotten all of the knowledge that you need. So trying is the first part, doing the work yourself, and then reaching out for more help is kind of how the process goes.
And if people wanted to reach out to you afterwards, where can they find you?
I'm on Facebook, so you could try to send me a message on there, or send me a friend request. I'm not on Twitter. Instagram is probably the best, or my email is m.kirkpatrick@usa.edu. Or there's also an email button on my Instagram page, or the DMs also work. I check those often. So.
All right, perfect. All right, Howie, closing statement.
Yeah, I think I would say the same thing. I like to think of myself as an open book in terms of answering any sort of questions that I can answer. Again, like Madison said, I don't know everything. I really don't. So don't expect that from me. And I think, and definitely give me some grace for anything that, you know, I might take some time to get to your question if you do ask me. And then one last thing I would like to bring up was my language that I've been using for this entire hour. I've been using queer and trans folks and versus LGBTQ plus. For me, I'm comfortable saying queer, and I use that to kind of as an umbrella term for the entire LGBTQ community. Some people are not okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend that if you are someone who is referring to them and you're not necessarily part of the community, I would stick to the LGBTQ plus. I like to say queer because it's easier for me, and to me it kind of signals a way for me to, like, I don't know, kind of signal to other people that I'm part of the community because I'm more comfortable saying that.
Mm-hmm.
But just to put that out there, because I know that some people might have been confused about, is it okay to say queer? Is it not okay? I would stick with LGBTQ if you are unsure, and then, you know, you'll figure it out as you move along.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. So where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Similarly to Madison, I am not on Twitter. I am on Facebook. You can probably message me there. I am on Instagram. My account is private, but you are more than welcome to send me a DM. You can send me an email. It's my name hyphen in the middle, so Howie-Wang at outlook.com. You know, hang out, come chat with me. I'm more than happy just to chat and make some friends.
That's perfect. Well, thank you both so much. I know I really, really appreciate this conversation. I always appreciate talking with you both. It's always the highlight of my day. I know everybody else appreciates it as well. I have just 2 quick announcements to give on behalf of APTA students, and then we're signing off for the night. First announcement is applications for the APTA Student Members Board of Directors are open, and the deadline has actually been extended to July 3rd, so you have a few more days to work on it. Please get those in. Contact nominating committee for more information. Nominating committee or someone else will put their information in the comments, and you can apply at engage.apta.org. And like I've been saying, if you want to have the opportunity to meet incredible people like Howie and Madison and do my job is also open. So please apply. And the next APTA Live student night will actually be next weekend on Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern on a topic that I think a lot of people are going to find extremely relevant for all times, but maybe especially now. I want to share just a quick quote before we leave. Howie, this is from your blog post. You said,
oh gosh.
You said, being yourself means that you love who you are, you respect who you are, and you don't let other people define who you are. Thank you both so much again. And thank you to everyone who joined in tonight. Take care, everybody.